Now, this square is about the miracles of the Lord. You know, we know that when the Messiah came, he took the loaves and the fishes and he multiplied the food. He raised the dead. This is Lazarus. He raised the dead. He did many miracles. He healed the blind. And you know what he kept saying to them? You know, he'd say to them, I am the door. I am the way. I am the bread. And you know, his disciples had said, we found the Messiah. It's the one that Moses wrote about and the prophets wrote about. And you know, some of the people asked him, you know, and they were asking him who he was, you know, if he was the Messiah, and he said, if you had believed Moses, you would believe me, because Moses wrote about me. Okay, now let's think a minute. What did Moses write? It's almost everything we've been looking at in all these squares. Moses wrote about creation. Moses wrote about being in oneness with God. Look, Moses wrote about a promised descendant who would come, who would defeat Satan. Moses wrote about that line of descent. Moses wrote about God being pleased with the blood sacrifice of the Lamb. Moses wrote about one door, one way to safety. And you know, the Messiah was saying, I am the door. He who comes through me will be saved. Moses wrote about Abraham. Moses wrote about Abraham, a man who believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. It's about salvation by faith. Moses wrote about Abraham. He was a father willing to sacrifice his son. And what did the Messiah say? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And you know what we see here? At this place, we see that God provided a substitute sacrifice. And we're going to see. But remember, he wrote about the Messiah. We see a substitute sacrifice that's without spot or blemish. All right, we see a son, we see a picture of a son who's willing to be in subjection to his father's will. Look at this. Moses wrote about Jacob's dream. All right, what was the dream? The dream was showing that God is going to make a way to heaven. Now think with me. Think with me. All right, Moses wrote about Joseph. Here was a brother who was falsely accused. He was punished. His brothers were jealous of him for something he didn't do. We see a brother who started his ministry at the age of 30. This is when the Messiah started his ministry, at the age of 30. You know, we see in Joseph a picture. Remember, it said that there was a famine in all the nations, and that all the nations were coming to Joseph for bread. What did the Messiah say when he was here? He said, I am the bread of life. He who eats of me will never hunger. Moses wrote about himself, about a little baby who Pharaoh was trying to kill all the little baby boys. Remember what happened when the Messiah was born? Remember what happened with Herod? You know, whenever the wise men came, and he was furious because he knew that they were looking for the Messiah. And remember, in Bethlehem, he killed all the baby boys. See, we saw the picture here. Moses wrote about the Messiah. Moses wrote about a Passover lamb, a lamb an innocent lamb who was going to be sacrificed, whose blood could be applied, and the judgment would pass over. You know, Moses wrote about the parting of the Red Sea when they were delivered from the hands of their enemy. Moses wrote about God coming down and speaking to them, and they heard the voice of God. They heard the voice of God. The Messiah spoke to them. He spoke to them. They heard him speaking. And do you know what he said? The words that I'm speaking to you, they are spirit and life.